Lydia Harper was a quiet woman who had learned to survive loneliness after the death of her husband. She lived in a small suburban house filled with memories and quiet mornings. Her days followed a simple routine: coffee by the window light, cleaning old photo frames, and reading letters she never sent. When her son Daniel asked to move back home with his wife Melissa, she said yes without hesitation. She believed family should always have a place to return. At first they were polite and warm. They thanked her for meals and smiled often. But slowly the warmth faded. Doors began to close more often. Voices lowered when Lydia entered rooms. Strangers appeared briefly and disappeared without greeting. The spare room light stayed on late into the night. Lydia felt like a guest in her own home. Melissa stopped making eye contact. Daniel avoided conversation. Food went missing. Her favorite chair smelled like unfamiliar perfume. She heard footsteps after midnight. Whispers floated through the hallway. A lock appeared on a door that had never been locked before. Lydia told herself not to imagine things. She blamed age and tired thoughts. But her heart felt uneasy. She began writing small notes in a notebook, things that felt wrong. She noticed cash envelopes tucked into bags. She noticed shoes that did not belong to anyone she knew. She noticed the sound of laughter that was not meant for her. One night Lydia overheard her name spoken in a tone that chilled her. She stood behind her bedroom door listening. Her son said something about papers. Melissa laughed quietly. Lydia stepped back before they could sense her presence. That night she did not sleep. She made a decision that required patience and silence. Lydia announced she would visit her sister in another state. Daniel barely looked up when she told him. Melissa smiled too quickly. They helped her pack and even offered a ride to the bus station. But Lydia never boarded the bus. She walked instead to her neighbor Ruth's house. Ruth had known Lydia for decades. When Lydia explained her fears, Ruth believed her without doubt. They opened the guest room window that faced Lydia's house. From there Lydia could see her front door clearly. That first night strangers entered with suitcases. They handed cash to Melissa. Daniel showed them rooms and smiled politely. Lydia felt her breath shake. Her home was being used without her consent. The next day more guests arrived. They laughed, drank wine, and treated the house like a hotel. Lydia watched her own bedroom door open. Fresh sheets were carried inside. Her dresser moved. Photos taken down. She pressed her hand to the glass to stay steady. That room held memories of her husband. Now it was rented for cash. Later that evening Lydia saw something worse. Melissa held a folder. Daniel spoke about doctors and evaluations. Words like confusion and medication floated through the air. They discussed signatures. They spoke about control. They spoke about placing Lydia somewhere safe away from the house. Safe meant forgotten. Lydia felt her legs weaken. But she did not cry. Instead she reached for her notebook. She wrote everything. Times, faces, movements. Ruth recorded videos quietly from the window. Every whisper, every visitor was saved. Lydia realized she was not powerless. She was observant. She was patient. And she was still the owner of that house. Lydia stayed hidden in Ruth's guest room for several days, and each day revealed something new and more painful than the last. She watched strangers come and go, rolling bags, laughing loudly, treating the house like a temporary stop instead of a place built with love and sacrifice. She saw Melissa counting cash at the kitchen table, while Daniel updated something on his phone, likely responding to new messages from people asking for rooms. Lydia noticed how confidently they moved now that they believed she was gone. They rearranged furniture, removed pictures, and boxed up items that once defined her life. They spoke openly without fear, discussing prices and schedules and rules for guests. One afternoon Lydia saw Daniel guide a couple into her old sewing room, explaining it had good light for short stays. Her chest tightened, remembering hours spent there mending clothes and memories. Another night Lydia watched Melissa enter the medicine cabinet, removing bottles, placing them into a separate bag. She heard her say something about making things easier if Lydia returned confused and tired. Those words sat heavy in the air. Lydia realized this was not just about money, it was about erasing her. Slowly and quietly she felt anger, but also clarity. She was no longer guessing, she was witnessing the truth unfold in front of her eyes. Ruth sat beside her every evening, holding her hand as they listened and watched. Ruth urged her to act carefully and wisely. Lydia agreed, knowing now that rushing would only help those who wished her harm. She began planning in silence. She organized notes, labeled times, guest descriptions, conversations, and behaviors. She remembered her late husband's words about standing firm even when afraid, and that night Lydia slept for the first time without fear, but with purpose burning quietly inside her. Lydia knew that every move now needed patience and care. She stayed in Ruth's home during the day and returned to the window each evening, watching quietly as the house she once ruled slipped further from her control. Melissa began giving instructions to guests like a manager, assigning rooms, collecting money, and setting rules. Daniel handled phone calls and messages, his voice confident and practiced. Lydia noticed how easily he lied, telling strangers the home belonged to family away on long trips, sometimes saying the owner was unwell and resting. Those words cut deeper than any insult. Lydia felt herself becoming invisible, erased in their story. One morning she watched a man arrive with papers and a clipboard. He walked inside and stayed for a long time. Lydia felt a cold fear. Ruth listened carefully through a cracked window as Melissa spoke about assessments and signatures and next steps. They said Lydia would not resist if handled gently. Lydia heard them laugh softly as if discussing groceries. In that moment the final piece fell into place. Lydia understood they were preparing to take everything, using her age against her, using trust as a weapon. Ruth insisted they speak to someone outside immediately, but Lydia asked for one more night. She wanted everything clear and complete. That night they recorded conversations through the open window. Voices floated freely, careless and sure of victory. Melissa spoke about moving Lydia into a quiet place with rules and schedules. Daniel spoke about selling the house later, splitting money, starting fresh. Lydia wrote until her hand cramped. She gathered proof not just of theft but of intention, the kind that could not be denied or explained away by excuses. When the house finally went quiet, Lydia closed the notebook and whispered to herself that she was not leaving her life without a fight. The next morning Lydia did not sit by the window. She sat at the small table in Ruth's kitchen, staring at her notebook, feeling the weight of everything she had seen and heard. The fear that once lived in her chest had changed into something steadier and stronger. Ruth made coffee and spoke gently, reminding Lydia that what mattered now was action, not hesitation. Lydia listened and finally agreed that silence had served its purpose and truth needed allies. They contacted a lawyer recommended by a friend, someone known for protecting seniors and property rights. Lydia spoke slowly, explaining everything from the late-night strangers to the plans about doctors and signatures. The lawyer listened without interruption, asking Ruth to share the recordings and notes. When Lydia finished, there was no doubt in his voice. He said this was not misunderstanding or family tension, but a calculated attempt to deceive, exploit, and control. He advised Lydia to stay hidden a bit longer while he prepared a formal response and contacted local authorities about the illegal rental activity. Days passed and Lydia continued watching from the window as if nothing had changed, yet inside she felt different. She noticed details she had missed before, like guests paying in cash only or signing handwritten slips instead of proper records. The lawyer asked her to list everything missing from a house: furniture, documents, jewelry, photographs. She realized pieces of her life were already being packed away without her knowledge. Ruth helped her make copies of her ownership papers, proving the house belonged solely to Lydia and that no authority had been granted to anyone else. Lydia signed new legal forms revoking any possible access Daniel might have claimed and placed everything safely in the lawyer's care. Late one evening Lydia stood again by the window, watching Melissa count money with calm satisfaction, and for the first time Lydia felt no fear, only certainty. She knew the truth now had power, and it was finally on her side. The lawyer moved quickly and quietly, advising Lydia not to reveal herself yet because surprise would be her strongest protection. While official complaints were filed about unlicensed rental, zoning violations, and potential fraud, Lydia remained in Ruth's home, watching patterns repeat as new guests arrived and left unaware they were part of something illegal. She noticed how Melissa avoided neighbors and how Daniel flinched whenever a car slowed near the house. Fear had begun to creep into their confidence. Lydia received updates through the lawyer, who confirmed that authorities were building a case and that medical manipulation plans were taken seriously, especially involving elder abuse. Lydia felt a deep ache knowing her own child had spoken about controlling her mind, but she did not allow grief to weaken her resolve. One afternoon she saw Daniel arguing with Melissa in the kitchen, frustration visible in his movements. Their voices rose and then dropped quickly. Lydia guessed money was becoming a problem. Too many guests, too many risks. The lawyer prepared restraining documents and property protection orders, ensuring no one could claim authority over Lydia or her assets without her presence. When everything was ready, Lydia was told she would return home with officials present. That night Lydia barely slept, rehearsing her steps and words in her mind. Ruth held her hand and reminded her that courage did not mean lack of fear, it meant walking forward anyway. As dawn broke, Lydia stood at the window one last time, watching the house that had held her life, and whispered that she was coming back, and this time she would not be silent. Quietly, without warning, just as the lawyer planned, she stepped into the car, feeling older and stronger at the same time, accompanied by her attorney and officials who spoke calmly and confidently. When they entered the house, Lydia watched Daniel's face drain of color as he saw her standing there steady and alert. Melissa froze near the hallway, her hands shaking slightly as questions began. The guests were asked to leave one by one, confusion spreading across their faces as authorities explained The situation. Lydia walked through her home slowly, seeing the damage and changes. Furniture moved, walls bare where memories once hung, drawers disturbed, spaces invaded. But she did not falter. She listened as evidence was presented, recordings, documents, dates, times, plans spoken aloud. Without shame, Melissa tried to speak, but words failed. Daniel avoided his mother's eyes, unable to deny what had been captured in their own voices. The illegal rental operation was shut down immediately. Locks were changed. Guests were escorted out, and the house fell into a heavy silence that felt unfamiliar yet relieving. Lydia sat at her kitchen table while officials explained next steps. She signed papers with a steady hand, confirming ownership, protection, and separation. Melissa's anger finally surfaced, accusing Lydia of betrayal, but Lydia remained calm, saying nothing because the truth had already spoken. Daniel broke down quietly, not in apology but in fear of consequences, and Lydia understood then that remorse was not guaranteed and justice did not require forgiveness. As evening fell, the house was empty again, but not peaceful yet. Lydia stood alone in her living room, breathing deeply, knowing this was only the beginning of reclaiming what was taken from her piece by piece. The days that followed were heavy and slow as Lydia remained in the house while legal steps unfolded around her. Officials returned more than once, documenting damages, missing items, and misuse of space. Rooms, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and unfamiliar. Lydia moved carefully through them, touching walls and door frames, reminding herself that she was still here, and that mattered. The lawyer arranged court proceedings and restraining measures that kept Daniel and Melissa away from the property. Lydia received calls from neighbors who had been confused by the constant visitors and late noise. Many apologized for not questioning things sooner. Lydia assured them gently that silence often comes from trust. Misplaced nights. With a hardest, the house creaked and echoed, reminding her of whispered plans and laughter she was never meant to hear. Yet each morning Lydia cleaned, opened windows, and slowly restored order, placing photos back on walls, washing sheets, rearranging furniture in familiar ways. She found some of her belongings boxed and hidden, and others gone forever, but loss no longer felt paralyzing. It felt like proof of survival. Messages from Daniel came through lawyers only, cold and distant. Melissa said nothing at all. Lydia accepted that closure would not arrive wrapped in apology. Instead, it would come through boundaries and self-respect. She attended meetings, signed papers, and listened as judges and officials acknowledged what she had endured as exploitation and intent, not family misunderstanding. Each word strengthened her sense of identity. No longer fragile widow, no longer confused mother, but homeowner, protector, and witness to her own strength. As weeks passed, the house began to breathe again, and so did Lydia. She started sitting by her front window once more, not to watch in fear, but to enjoy sunlight, knowing the silence now belonged to her alone. As time passed, Lydia felt herself changing in ways she did not expect. She began to recognize how deeply she had been underestimated, not only by her son and his wife, but by herself. In the quiet years after her husband was gone, she spent her mornings speaking with counselors and advocates who helped seniors reclaim confidence after betrayal, and each conversation reminded her that her experience was not rare, but her response was strong. Legal outcomes continued to move in her favor. Restraining orders were finalized, financial restitution was discussed, and the attempt to control her health and independence was formally acknowledged as abuse. Lydia listened calmly, absorbing each step without celebrating, because peace mattered more than victory. Neighbors stopped by with baked goods and gentle words, rebuilding a sense of community that had quietly disappeared. Lydia learned to say no again. She refused guilt, she refused pressure, and she refused contact that did not respect her boundaries. The house slowly returned to a place of familiarity. Fresh paint covered scuffed walls, new locks secured each door, and new routines filled the silence. She planted flowers in the front yard, symbolizing beginnings, not endings, and every time she watered them she felt rooted again, not trapped. Phone calls from relatives came with questions and disbelief. Lydia told the truth without anger, without softness, simply honesty. She learned that truth spoken calmly carried weight. Daniel faded into distance, no longer a presence in her daily life, just a memory of a lesson learned. Lydia understood now that family was not defined by blood alone, but by respect and safety and choice, and with that understanding she felt lighter than she had in years, ready to finish this chapter on her own terms. The house felt different now, not because it had changed completely, but because Lydia had. She walked through each room with a quiet confidence, no longer questioning her right to be there. She began hosting small gatherings, neighbors, friends, people who had stood by her, bringing laughter back into spaces that once felt stolen. She shared her story carefully, not as a warning filled with fear, but as a reminder that awareness could protect even the most trusting hearts. The legal process reached its final stages, and Lydia sat in the courtroom listening as decisions were read, acknowledging wrongdoing and restoring full control of her property and life. There were consequences and boundaries set in firm language, but Lydia did not focus on them. She focused on the feeling of walking out free and untouched in spirit. After everything she endured, she met with counselors who encouraged her to explore new chapters, volunteering, mentoring others facing similar challenges. She agreed, realizing her pain could become guidance. She began writing her experiences, not to relive the hurt, but to release it. Pages filled with reflection, strength, and clarity. She no longer sought understanding from Daniel or Melissa. Understanding came from within. She accepted that some relationships end not with closure, but with distance, and the distance can be healthy. Lydia woke one morning months later to a quiet house filled with soft light and realized she no longer carried fear into her day. The past had settled into memory, not pain. The routine she built now felt natural, strong, and peaceful. She brewed her coffee and stood by the same window where she once watched in silence. But this time she was not hiding, she was home. Letters arrived from organizations thanking her for sharing her experience and from individuals who felt less alone because of her honesty. Lydia learned that survival did not mean bitterness, it meant awareness and dignity. She forgave herself for trusting too easily, and understood that kindness was not weakness, it was strength. When paired with boundaries, the house became a place of renewal again. Laughter returned through visits, friendships, and quiet celebrations of ordinary days. Lydia no longer waited for apologies that might never come. She had already given herself closure by choosing safety and truth over denial. Her story did not end with loss, but with presence, with the understanding that age did not make her fragile, and love did not require silence. She knew now that protecting oneself was an act of self-respect, and that listening to instinct could change everything. Lydia closed her notebook, placed it on a shelf, and stepped outside into the garden she had planted, watching flowers grow where fear once lived, and in that moment she felt free, whole, and fully her own once more.